Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited for this conversation today. Thank you all for being here. Today's conversation is all about the AI effect. That is really all we're hearing about, we're reading about these days, is how AI is coming for our careers, our lives. And why I'm very excited about this conversation is because we're going to be focusing on how this can impact our careers as an individual, but also from an HR, people ops perspective, how you can actually use AI to better improve your culture, also to address some of your employees' concerns and needs and challenges. You know, the same way that we uh, experienced the Industrial Revolution, AI is coming and taking over. And we would want to be able to provide a space where we can have an honest, candid conversation about what this actually means for our future, what this means for our workplaces, what this means for our careers. So I am joined here by a phenomenal group of panelists and experts that know this stuff, and we're going to go ahead and get into it. As we are getting started, please drop your name, where you're from or where you're based, and also what you do in the chat. Amazing, amazing. So we got Toronto in the house. Hey, Kate, welcome. Cody, thanks for being here. Liz, welcome. She's also on our Perfecta team. Chantel from Toronto. Okay, I love that we have some Toronto folks in here. Tony, welcome, welcome from New Jersey. If you all are just joining, say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from and what you currently do. That'll help us as we shape today's conversation. All right, welcome, Brooke from Charlotte, Sharon from Baltimore. We got two. Do we have two Sarahs? No, Sharon and then Sarah. Okay. Luis, Arkella or Arquella, please correct me. And Molly, welcome. All right, y'all. Continue to say hello in the chat as we're going through today's conversation. Drop your questions, drop your comments, use the emojis. At the bottom, you'll see a react button. You can use that. You can also, if you click on, let's see, looking for the more option. If you want to turn the closed captions on, you can. We are also recording this as well, just for the purpose of being able to send this out after today, so you all can watch the replay. All right, so we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about Perfecta. I'm sorry, before we do that, let me introduce our panelists. So I'm just going to go who is to my right. That's Amy. Well, maybe I should follow the slide. We'll go with Avisha and then Kenya and then Amy. So if you can just share a little bit about your background, what you do, and maybe why you're excited for this conversation today.
Oops, I was muted. Thanks, Letitia. It's great to see everyone today. My name is Avisha Sanasi. I am a talent management consultant here at Perfecta. And over the past decade, my work has really focused on talent development, culture, leadership, employee experience, and then most recently, executive coaching. So a lot of what I do sits at the intersection of people, change, and just really organizational transformation. And I'm really excited about this conversation because I think we're entering a moment where companies are going to have to figure out how to move quickly without losing the human side of work in the process. And I think that'll be a really important part of this conversation today. Thank you.
And so I guess it comes over to me. Hi, everyone. My name is Kenya Reynolds. I am an infrastructure and people operations consultant with Perfecta. What I focus on heavily is around the infrastructure that's used to build out a people ops function. So we're talking all the processes, all the tools, creating those dashboards, doing a lot of that strategic work so that your organization is set up from the ground up with all the bases of what it needs for people operations. So when you think people ops, you're thinking everything that falls within the scope of HR and all the functions that kind of sit in that space, but operational piece there. And so I'm really, really excited about this conversation because from a people ops perspective and operations in general, I'm looking at this from a perspective of how do we make sure that companies are implementing AI in a way that supports what's already around in the organization? Are we thinking about this in a strategic way? And then, of course, growth. What does AI mean when we start to think of the growth of the people in the organization, the growth of process in an organization, and what does that really look like? I'll pass it over to Amy.
Thank you, Kenya. Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Nin. I am a full-time AI change leader in a tech company. That is my day job. So I lead AI enablement and learning and change work. But before that, and I think this is really important, before that, I was an organizational change person. So I've been on learning and development teams, DEI teams, have been working on a lot of culture change types of initiatives in my career. And historically, I've only been on people teams. And I think that's important to say because I like to talk a lot about how AI is something that we all have to learn, and you don't have to be technical to be able to be really effective with AI. And all of everything that I know basically about AI has been self-taught with some support from really great communities, really great, leaders in the space. But generally, right, I think it's important to say that, yeah, you don't need to be technical to be able to be really effective at leveraging AI. So I'm excited about this conversation because I really fundamentally believe that AI is the greatest and most disruptive change that we will probably experience in our entire lifetimes. And because of that, how do we just get really clear about the change that is going to happen, and how do we prepare our employees for what that change looks like in a humane way?
Amazing. Thank you all so much. So I'll tell you all a little bit about Perfecta. If this is your first webinar, say yes in the chat if you have been to a few of our different webinars. Also just say, hey, I'm back, or this is my second, or this is my third one, or I lost count. Would love to get a feel of who our newcomers are, who our returners are. Cody, first time. Kate, second time. I'm glad that you were able to come back again. It sounds like the first one was valuable. Sarah second, first. Okay, amazing, amazing. So I'll tell you, oh, Chantel said I lost count. I love it. So I'll tell you all a little bit about Perfecta. Essentially, we work in the business of culture transformation. Sorry, let me turn my camera on so y'all can see me. At Perfecta, we work in the business of culture transformation. What that means is that we always want to ensure that the companies we work with are keeping the people as the center and the focus of their business and the heart of their culture. No matter how quickly they're growing, that they are always thinking about the employee experience, about retaining their best talent, and about being competitive in the marketplace. And so what that looks like is supporting small to mid-sized businesses with fractional HR support, HR people ops strategy. We help companies build people operations from the ground up. We also create learning and development programs. We offer trainings to employee resource groups. We are an organization built of experts that are passionate about the work that it takes to make sure that people feel seen, heard, and valued at work. Right. And with that being said, many of our clients have in the last year have implemented AI requirements for their employees. And the challenge that falls behind that is sometimes there's not always a set process of how should employees be using AI? What should that look at? What should they be considering, or what should they look at when it comes to those requirements? How are we doing this in an ethical way? How are we easing employees' concerns that may be resistant to AI, right? And so there is a lot of meat that we're going to get into today to talk about AI adoption, integration. How does this relate to driving performance? But most importantly, how do we do this in a way that really feels good for everyone? So, with that being said, I will turn it over to Kenya to go into a little bit more about the discussion.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much, Letitia. So what we're going to be talking about in today's roundtable is what companies are getting wrong as they roll out AI tools and how it's quietly eroding the culture of organizations. We're also going to take a look at how to protect and develop the human skills of AI that AI cannot replace, like such things as critical thinking, judgment, and connection. And then what intentional AI adoption looks like in practice, from the role design to keeping employees engaged through the shift from how they've been formerly been working up until now using AI.
Great. Thanks, Kenya. And then I'll turn it over to Avisha.
Thank you. So, we thought these were a few interesting data points to ground us just before we jump into the meat of the conversation today. So, what we've seen from Gallup is that global employee engagement has now declined for the second consecutive year, with that estimated impact of productivity in the trillions globally. And I think this is really important context because organizations are trying to drive major technological transformation in AI at a time when many employees are already feeling disconnected from work. We also saw that in industries like finance, insurance, and tech, nearly 1 in 3 employees believe AI could eliminate their job within the next 5 years. And whether or not that ultimately happens, what is really critical is that perception matters because perception really shapes and changes how employees experience this change. And then lastly, what we saw, or a good data point here, is that manager engagement has also declined significantly in recent years. Yet managers are the same people organizations are depending on to help employees navigate AI adoption in real time. So I do think these trends create a really interesting backdrop for the conversation that we're about to have. Thanks, Letitia.
Thank you, Avisha. So I have a question for the audience here. After you all are hearing these stats, or I'm sure there are some thoughts, feelings that are coming up for you all. So the question that we have for you is, what is one word that describes how you feel about AI's impact on your work right now? Just the first word that comes to mind. Don't even overthink it. And I'm seeing some words that are kind of a mix of different emotions, which is certainly valid. Multiplier. Cody, it sounds like you're thinking about efficiency and maximizing your work, your time. Anxious, tentative, forced. I'm sure a lot of people are feeling that. Love, excited, invaluable, speed. Other words, you all, other words that you want to drop in the chat. What's the one word that describes how you feel about AI's impact on your work? I kind of want to ask our panelists here, actually. This was not a question for you all, but I'm curious to know what is that one word that describes how you feel about it. So, Kenya?
I would say intrigued. I think that this is such a cool space to be in. And so I'm intrigued to see how we grow and evolve, how organizations adopt this, how you adopt this in your everyday work and life, how you're using it. I see students using AI, and organizations such as higher learning organizations are having to put in a lot of frameworks and things. So I'm intrigued.
Mm-hmm. That's a great word. Avisha?
I might be cheating a little. This is 2 words, but I'm cautiously optimistic. I think AI has the power to transform the world as we know it in a really amazing way. Granted, a lot of human decisions have to be made for that to happen or transform
Mhm.
it into something amazing. So I'm still cautious, but I'm really optimistic about the power of AI and what it can do.
Yeah. Cautiously optimistic. Yeah, that's a good one. Amy, what about you?
I'm also going to cheat and I have two words. But the two words for me are new possibilities. So I think it's
Mm,
really wild that, 2 years ago, my life looked very different than it does today. And what I'm able to do because of AI looks fundamentally different. So, again, I'm not a technical person. I have really only
really?
learned a lot of this stuff over the last couple years. But I think about how, I am building and shipping tools and I'm not a coder, I'm building and shipping tools that I didn't even know were possible. And that is allowing me to free up my time to do a lot more than I realized I could. So, yeah, new possibilities.
Hmm. That's a good one too. Whew. And I know I asked you all the question, and I'm not even sure about my own. So I'm a Capricorn, and I think that we like to be efficient and we like to make the most out of our days. And so for me, the word that comes to mind is it's not even a feeling, but it's improved efficiency. It has helped me to live a more efficient life. It's also helped me to, again, just make the most out of my days. It helps me to
Mhm.
organize my calendar and schedule, um, communicate better. I can kind of just give I use Claude. That's the main tool that I use. It's a little bit of Gemini as well, but I'm able to just do a brain dump because I tend to think a lot as a business leader, and it helps me to kind of organize my thoughts. And so I feel like I've been able to use it in a way that's made my life a bit easier. But I also recognize that there is still a lot of pressure and there's a lot of unknown around what will this look like in terms of like the word here in the chat says, like a forest perspective, especially for those organizations that are, you know, encouraging employees to utilize it, but without those guardrails, right? That can be a
Mhm.
challenge. And so this kind of leads me into the first question that I have. And this question is for you, Kenya. So
Mhm.
we're seeing a massive gap between what CEOs think AI is doing for productivity and what employees are experiencing. So what are you seeing inside the organizations that you work with, and what are some of those gaps that exist?
Sure. Thank you so much, Letitia. So when we look inside organizations grappling with this very thing, we are seeing a fundamental shift in how people actually spend their day. They are moving away from being a creator of things to being editors, unfortunately. And instead of doing work from scratch, employees are now taking a lot of their time debugging AI or fact checking what AI has put out there as a draft. And that means that, is it really effective? They could have maybe taken the time themselves to create the document from scratch. That's something that I like to call the hidden AI tax. It's the time that people are spending babysitting AI to some degree or another to make sure that it hasn't missed something or spoken, used facts incorrectly or quoted something wrong. And it's just a time that's spent doing that. The reason we aren't seeing productivity boom is because of process fragmentation. That's what I think is happening. So many companies are actually just sprinkling AI on top of like old clunky work streams and workflows and processes instead of really digging in and revamping those things from the bottom up. Because AI would be great at the foundational piece, but if you haven't fixed the foundational piece, now you just, what do they say? Slapping paint on a pig. We don't want to do that, right? So if you think about it from this perspective, if a team uses AI to say write a report, and it takes about 10 minutes, let's say, but your internal processes still takes 3 to 5 days going from person to person with tons of emails and a whole meeting has to be conducted. Is it really being efficient? Is it really giving the organization back their time? So they should actually be looking at how do they better streamline the process and then incorporate the AI on top of it. What's that leading to? It's leading to people in the organizations just aren't experiencing that productivity. It feels heavier to them than what they initially thought that it would. And so they're not able to really produce as quickly as they expected to. So, how do you fix it, right? You need to redesign the workload and how you are actually putting work onto people's work streams. It's a culture shift. That's what will happen. It's a deep rooted culture shift and some level of change management, which I'm sure Amy will speak to when we get to questions with her. Management has to start asking themselves, when do we need to add an AI tool? And then if so, what are we removing? How are we fixing what the process looks like? So one of the things I would say is two of the key takeaways from this is conduct a workflow audit and look for AI bottlenecks. Where are things getting trapped in AI and causing more of a friction point? And then what can you pull from it? And then I would also do maybe a net zero workload policy. Anytime you add something new, what are you taking off to balance out the thing that you added on that's new? Are there low risk tasks, low value tasks that can be made into a more manual thing to keep you thinking? And we'll talk a little bit more about this later, to keep you more engaged in the work than using a big AI tool that's going to require you to go back and reread through it. So those would be my two takeaways from something like this.
Thanks, Kenya. Also, Amy or Avisha, if you all want to respond here, you're more than welcome to. Any thoughts before we move on to the next question?
I completely agree with what Kenya shared. I mean, I think we also should expect that people early on, when they're experimenting with AI, are not going to be as productive because they're figuring out how to use the tools, right? And that makes total sense. So I think that companies should expect that and it takes time to redesign workflows. So as you're redesigning workflows, as you're upskilling your employees on the tools, there is naturally going to be not the level of productivity that you want. And so I think we should normalize that.
I also agree. Nothing to add on my end, but as someone who's been experimenting with AI for quite a number of years now, I too did not start off too well, right? It's a skill that we're developing. So I do think it's something, and I know we'll talk about this more too, I'm sure, right? It's something that employers need to invest in their people, right? How am I helping you optimize those skills to really become better at using this tool? But it doesn't, to Amy's point, happen overnight.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. It's a learning curve. And we are going to be experimenting probably forever. This is something that is changing by the day, by the minute, right? I'm curious for everyone here in this chat, is your company rolling out training? Have they already rolled out training? Just drop a yes or no in the chat. Super curious about that. We got a comment from, is it Christina? Please correct me. That is something companies are not taking the upskilling time into account when making these AI investments. They are expecting immediate results. Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely. And that's what we're seeing here as well. So, with that being said, Avisha, I have a question for you. When employees are anxious about the future of their careers with the rise of AI, how can company leaders respond?
Yeah, and I love this question because as someone who, although I'm cautiously optimistic, there is still that cautious piece in there, right? I do have some anxiousness or anxiety around it. So I love this question. And so first, I do think leaders need to recognize and anticipate this anxiety around AI instead of ignoring it or dismissing it, right? And I would like to talk about that anxiety a bit more and frame it in the context of previous human technological advancement, if you will. Because what I will say is that humans have always created tools that extend our ability. So think of, say, like a calculator helped us do math faster, search engines like Google, in their heyday, not today, Google, Gemini. So search engines helped us find knowledge instantly and think of things like spell check, right? That helped us improve our writing. So what's different though is those tools mostly supported one specific task at a time. And so, what feels so uniquely different about AI is that we're moving beyond tools that simply help employees complete tasks and really towards systems that increasingly support workflows, make recommendations, and eventually take action more autonomously, as we think about AI agents, right? And AGI and the future of AI. So, Right? AI can write, it can summarize, it can analyze information really well. It can even generate really great ideas. It can communicate, it can assist with decision making, and that's all within the same workflow. So the point that I'm driving towards is that employees are not just experiencing AI as another tool. Many people are experiencing it as technology that's moving into these areas of work that have been traditionally more deeply human and closely tied to our professional identity. And that's the key, right? And I think this all changes the emotional equation and heightens the anxiety. So these previous industrial revolutions, like you said, Letitia, they primarily transformed our physical labor. This one is really beginning to reshape our professional identity itself. So when we hear employees asking questions like, and I see this all the time on LinkedIn and organizations, right? Employees are asking questions like, what will make me more valuable in this age of AI? Will my role still matter? Is my role becoming obsolete? Those aren't just technology related questions. They're at its core identity questions, right? So that's the real thing, right? The anxiety is coming from this question of my professional identity. Like, who will I become? Will I still be needed? Will my role be valued as AI, the proliferation of AI continues? And so I think there are a few things organizations can do really well here to ease the anxiety while recognizing that it probably won't go away completely, right? So first, I'd recommend creating clarity early. So I always say uncertainty grows in silence. And so employees don't expect leaders to have every answer yet. And like Letitia said, everything is evolving so rapidly. But they do expect honesty about what is changing, right? What is still unknown and how roles may evolve over time. And what I've seen is that I think leaders sometimes wait too long to communicate because they feel that their messaging needs to be perfect or they need the perfect answers first. But in these moments of real transformation, transparency builds more trust than certainty. Even saying something like, here's what we know, here's what we're still figuring out, and here's how we'll keep you informed can significantly reduce like fear and that anxiety that we're seeing with AI. Second, what I'd recommend is involving employees in the transition instead of making AI feel like it's something that's happening to them. So, the organizations that are building trust are creating those opportunities for experimentation, feedback, learning, and even co-creation. They're giving employees a space to explore how can AI remove some of my low value work, right? What part of the employee experience can become better, and even figuring out where does human judgment still matter as we introduce AI? And this all comes down to the human aspect of it. People will always adapt much faster when they feel included in shaping the future instead of just reacting to something. The third thing I'll say here is that, and I think we've already touched on this, is that we need to invest in the human capability at the same pace that we're seeing companies invest in technological capability in AI. So it's not just about teaching people how to prompt or use a new tool. It's also about helping them build the judgment, confidence, and adaptability to work in tandem with the new AI and the new tools that we're introducing. And I promise I'm wrapping it up here. But the last thing I always like to say, and we touched on it with that data, is that managers are so critical. And I'm talking about those people leaders, the middle management level. They are so critical. They are absorbing the pressure from both directions, right? Executives want the acceleration and the speed and the adoption, but employees want the reassurance. Meanwhile, those managers are still trying to understand what this shift even means for their own teams, their roles, and their professional identity. So leaders to counteract this anxiety, they need to equip managers with the right tools, right? So that means giving them clear talking points, honest guidance on what's known and unknown. Also, the space to process their own questions and really practical tools for helping their teams experiment, learn, and adapt to all this. Because if managers are unsupported, that anxiety can continue to spread throughout the organization. But when managers are prepared and they have those resources, they can become important trust builders in the AI transition and adoption. So that's really what I'll leave you, with how we leaders might be able to help ease some of that anxiety that we're seeing with the adoption of AI.
Oh, Avisha, I just have to say that was phenomenal. I'm looking for the fire emoji here. I'll just use the hand clap for now. Goodness, there were so many gems and nuggets that you shared. I was trying to take notes as you were talking that I wanted to just respond to. The first point, I've never heard someone articulate how AI shapes a professional identity.
Yeah.
And that's really something I think for a lot of us to sit with, right? Even, honestly, here at Perfecta, as we are supporting our clients with implementing HR policies and programs and workflows, I'm oftentimes thinking about literally every morning, how does AI fit into this? How do we support our clients with improving their efficiencies around HR with AI and the amount of brain space that it takes to think about I never thought about how it is shaping my own professional identity. Amy or Kenya, I don't know if y'all have thoughts on that. And, I think the other thing I wanted to talk about is that it's okay for leaders to say they are still figuring it out. And I think that I'm big on language, right? Instead of saying, hey, I don't know what's going on with this AI stuff here, it's this is what I'm learning. This is what I'm figuring out. This is what I'm testing. This is what I'm experimenting. I think that is something that we can all really take away from this conversation. And I really just want to like retweet, double down on the investment in human capabilities as much as we are investing in the, technological capabilities. Like I am seeing a reduced investment in some of those human skills that you were talking about, right? Critical thinking, trust, empathy, right? The things that AI doesn't have, those skills are going to be even more important than ever as we continue to depend or rely on AI. And so, I really hope that, you all can take away from this just the different things that we should be considering adjacent to the AI adoption. So that's my thoughts. Great. Amy, Kenyon, anything else y'all want to add to that before we move to the next question?
I mean, the professional identity point so resonates for me as somebody who is literally going through a very real professional identity shift as we speak, being, more full-time in the AI space. I also know, right, that, when I think about even my own role around AI change and learning, my role will not be needed at a certain point because we'll have figured it out and it will just become part of what we do every day. And so I've been thinking about when that happens, what do I do for, for a living, for spending my time? So yeah, I think we're all going through it in various flavors. The other skill that I'll add to that I think is really important is systems thinking, which
Yes.
was always important, but I think it is even more important now because if you've ever sat with a team to help them dissect their workflow audit, so Kenya, I love the idea of like a workflow audit, but to do that is really hard, actually. It's incredibly difficult to ask a leader to sit down and say, undo your entire workflow and rethink about it from the start and how it all connects together is like a different level of systems thinking that we are asking people to do that they've never had to do before. And so I would just layer on the idea of systems thinking onto like one more human skill that is just going to be really critical in this moment.
Absolutely. And so, Amy, while we're here, question for you. As AI takes over more tasks, how do you make sure that performance reviews and career growth still reflect what employees are contributing and not just what they're producing?
Ooh, I think this is such a great question and one that I actually hear a lot because I think that companies are approaching this in all types of different ways. So I'm going to tell you what I don't think you should do, and then I'll tell you some stuff around where I think, how I think about reframing performance is actually useful. So what I wouldn't do is there are companies out there that say something like, okay, employee, you must use AI for 80% of your job. So 80% of the day, you need to be in AI. And I just don't know if I think that that is like a very productive nor useful way to measure employee performance. One, because it doesn't actually talk about impact. So, like, you could be using AI 80% of the day and not doing anything, right? And two, it also doesn't account for the complexity of roles that people have. So, there are roles where, sure, 80% of the job maybe could be done by AI, although I would, beg to differ, but sure, high percentage. There are a lot of roles that are just way more complex than that. So even think about like the HR space. Like, could you actually do 80% of your time in AI in an HR kind of role? Probably not, because you're interfacing with humans. There's so much nuance that AI can't pick up. Um, Companies, again, no shade to companies that have that as a measurement. I just don't know if I think that is the most productive one, nor a good way in this moment to measure employee impact and performance. I still think performance should be impact driven, but I think it looks different in this moment. And so, Avisha, you were talking about this, like the need to encourage experimentation, learning, growth. I actually think that we should be lifting up the people who are contributing to our organizational learning with AI. And that includes folks who are doing really cool things, like building cool things and saying, hey, company, I built this cool thing, go take a look. Here's how I built it. I think it also includes folks who failed at something. I'm about to deliver and share probably pretty broadly, like about a pilot that we ran that didn't work. But we learned a lot. And here is how the organization can take that learning forward and compound that learning. And so I think folks who are really visible, who are sharing what they're learning, either, failures or successes, should actually be lifted up in this moment because they're supporting the organizational change and culture. And that in itself is huge contribution and impact in a way that I think, goes beyond just meeting your individual goals. So I think about that as like a more productive measurement. I think that what I will also say is, you know, uh, companies in general, and we've started to touch on this, but somebody shared in the chat, right, that a lot of companies aren't taking into account upskilling time. I think that we need to be okay, like understanding what goals are non-negotiables. So, there are going to be some goals that you have to meet. It's part of your impact. It just is what it is. But there's probably going to be some stuff that maybe doesn't need to happen because it is not so critical. And what you should give then people the ability to do is that time to experiment, to play, to rewire workflows, if they're still hitting those like non-negotiable types of goals and having that impact. But I do think that that means that companies actually have to give time and space to do that. The number one thing that I've been hearing from companies around what is a barrier for employees is time. And so, I don't know if I always think time is like I think time is absolutely valid and also not always valid, right? You will make time for things that are important, but also time is very real. So I think both things can be both things can be true. But companies actually have to invest and allow employees the space to experiment, to play with tools, to rewire their workflows. And I also think that, the one lens I want to bring in here is the inclusion lens, right? So companies have a responsibility, in my opinion, to employees to decrease the capability gap that is barreling toward us. The capability gap around AI is so real. And like, if your company is not moving and closing that gap, I think you are doing your employees a disservice. And so, how do you as an organization think about giving not only time, but the right tooling, the right upskilling, and just like the ability to experiment? And so I think that those are really important elements as well.
Mhm. Thank you, Amy. Oh, that was just so incredible. The responsibility, to still commit to inclusion, especially in today's time, right? I think that is a very important call out. And also you talked about the is it a presentation or, like a discussion that you're rolling out to talk about the pilot that failed? My question on that is how, right? Like, how did you all say, hey, we are going to talk about failure. And I mean, I wouldn't even call it failure, right? It's learning, but you all are normalizing the power of experimentation. And so how were you all able to bring something like that, to a comfort level where your leadership was like, hey, yes, we should definitely talk about this?
I would say not perfect. So, there is so much change management involved on many angles to try to get a company to even be willing
Right,
to
right,
talk
right.
about what didn't work out. Some of that is rooted in, psychological safety, and does your organization have the psychological
Yes.
safety to be able to do that? And I wouldn't say psychological safety is perfect in any organization. So there's always work to be done around how do you, and when you think about folks who have the least power in organizations, too, it takes a lot of effort to ensure that you are creating a psychologically safe space for folks in particular who have less power, who are more junior, who feel more existential risk around AI to talk about their what's not working, or some of the difficulties that they're having. So I do think this has to be modeled
Yes.
from the top
Yes.
down. And so, given my role, I think it is important as somebody who works full time on AI to say all the stuff that I do is not perfect. And look, like I just did this whole pilot with money and investment and it didn't work out. And let me tell you why it didn't work out and what we learned from it. I do think that I have to give credit to just like some of the leaders I work with too. There was some pretty rigorous conversations around how do we just explicitly set the tone that we expect everyone to be experimenting in this moment and to be sharing and compounding our organizational learning with experimentation. So that expectation has been explicitly set pretty much by every leader, and I think that helps. Now, again, I do think leaders need to model it. I think folks who do AI full time need to model it as well. And so, yeah, I think this is like a moment of modeling.
Yeah. Well, please let us know how that. I'll be
Yeah.
reaching out to see how it goes. Is it this week or is it
It's
like
soon. There's not like a
soon?
date on it yet, but
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Yes, please, please, please
yeah.
let me know how that goes. And I'm also curious how that maybe changes or impacts either like the more conversations that you all are having about AI internally or how employees are responding to it. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that. All right, Kenya. We talk a lot about upskilling for AI, but what about protecting the skills AI can't replace, such as the critical thinking, the relationship building? How do we make sure that those skills don't get quietly devalued in the process?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a big thing to consider when you're thinking about your AI plan, right? And so one of the things that I hear executives constantly talk about is that concern that AI will continue to widen the gap in a lot of the soft skills inadvertently, right? A lot of those soft skills where they see people struggling with like social skills in the workplace, especially more junior employees, right? The ability to read the room or navigate a conflict situation or communicate effectively up and downstream. Managing up is a real thing. AI will not teach you how to manage up. They can help you rewrite the email. They can give you some talking points, but it's not going to really teach you how to manage up when you have to have those difficult conversations with your manager or supervisor or someone more senior to you in the organization. Beyond that, we're also seeing like a real loss or shift really in that junior employee to the senior employee pipeline. Like, so think about career pathing. How are people moving along the growth trajectory of their role? What does that really look like? And especially as we start to consider those employees who are older and ready to retire. How do we keep moving people along in that path if we don't have a good pipeline on the junior to mid-level, mid to senior pathway? What does that look like? Historically, those junior employees, they were learning things in a more manual way. So there were just skill sets that you were just going to pick up because you were doing these, data analysis in a more manual way. You had to think about risk in a very different way. But if you aren't using those manual skills anymore, are you really learning how to do it? You're able to input the data into AI, you're able to write a prompt into AI, but you don't actually know how to do it yourself. What if AI breaks? What are you going to do? Like, I think Avisha, you mentioned the calculator, but we still have to know how to do math on paper without the calculator. And that's an important skill that gets taken away the more we advance in AI. I also think that and this is something that I think Amy talked about as well, it's like the obsession with speed. All these organizations are so obsessed with like getting it done. And that's like why you see them, unfortunately laying off thousands of employees because they think
Sorry, I was
that.
looking at my email. No.
Does someone have a question? Okay. I'll continue. So, there's just this, it's just dangerous, right? Where AI in and of itself is just pushing this necessity for speed and getting things done really, really quickly. But you're also missing the patterns, right? AI is not going to pick that up in the same way that a human being is going to be able to see. What are the patterns? What are those risks? What are the inconsistencies? And I think there's a big piece in slowing down and allowing it to, as Amy said, fail. Being okay with the fact that this may not go the way that you expect it to, and that it is okay because it makes you learn. AI is new. I am sometimes often baffled when I see job descriptions that say, 5 to 8 years of AI experience. Oh, unless you built it, how in the functional use of it, because everyone wants to push towards that speed. And so two of the things that I advocate for using when you're trying to figure out like how to assess the skills gap piece is to mandate manual foundations for your new hires. People that are new to the organization, they should still have to do certain level of tasks manually. So it speaks to what Amy was talking about with that 80% of the tasks that are living in AI. Most jobs, that's not always realistic. And even if it was, is that the right thing to do? Is that what you should be doing in an organization first, right off the bat? You should be teaching your team members how to do it the quote old-fashioned way. They should at least understand what that looks like. You wouldn't take a kid and hand them at first grade and say, okay, here's this computer, go and do this math. That's probably not the best way to teach a child how to do math. They need to know that 5 + 5 = 10. We're going to use our fingers. We're going to use the abacus. We're going to use some paper. We're going to do something. But just giving them a computer just doesn't feel like the best way to teach those foundations. A second thing that I would suggest is that reward the human veto over speed, like the ability to say, no, I don't think we should do it this way. I think that we should shift our performance metrics and stuff into the production, therefore the impact, like Amy talked about. What are you producing? How is it impactful to the organization versus speed? So moving away from rewarding people for getting it done quickly and moving towards rewarding people for finding AI errors, pointing them out, seeing where the tool isn't necessarily as effective or efficient, identifying risks that AI may miss, or deciding sometimes that AI probably isn't the best tool and you should probably be doing a little bit of manual with a little bit of AI, maybe at the beginning or at the end. And so it's just finding that balance. And I think organizations need to support that. Again, it's a culture shift. And it's being more mindful when you make the decision to move to AI, that these are the things that we need to keep in there. That's that human aspect that Avisha talked about, that it seems to be getting eroded and lost in the process of moving towards AI.
Yeah. Thank you, Kenya. Yeah, it's very important for us to not, put 90% of our reliability on our skills into AI, but to consider those human elements. And everything doesn't need to be automated, right? Everything doesn't need to be, driven by AI. There definitely are those elements that do still could benefit from having that human element involved. All right, so I'm looking at the time. If you all have questions for us, please start dropping your questions in the chat so we can get to it. We'll try to save about 5 minutes at the end for questions. And so we'll ask if you all can keep these responses to about 2 minutes or so. I know that might be hard with there's so much knowledge to share. But Avisha, the question that I have for you is, for those companies that are getting AI adoption right, what do they look like from the inside and what are they doing differently?
Sure. It's a great question, and I'll try to be really quick here. But my summary statement is that I believe that the organizations that are navigating this the best are balancing their technological ambition and adoption for AI with human-centered leadership, right? And that means that they understand very early that AI adoption is not just a technology transformation. It's a workforce, it's a leadership, and it's ultimately a cultural transformation and it's organizational change. They're not just treating it as like a software rollout. They're thinking of the larger effect of AI. And I think there are three things that the strongest organizations are doing differently right now. And the first thing, I hope is resonant with folks on this call is that they're bringing HR into the conversation early, not after the strategy is already decided, because AI adoption at its core, it's already affecting our workflows. We're having to redesign roles. It's affecting learning and development. Amy mentioned this, right? They're affecting manager expectations, communication, trust, culture, really the gamut. And a really interesting example that I saw recently was um, at Atlassian, that company, their chief people officer's role actually expanded to include AI enablement. So I thought that was pretty cool. They're a CPO as well as AI enablement officer. So that sends a powerful message to me, at least, that AI adoption is not only a technical issue, it's that people, leadership, and a change management issue. So one practical takeaway for everyone on the call is if HR is not already involved in the AI steering committees, innovation councils, or implementation conversations, they definitely need a seat at that table now. And we talked about this earlier, so I'll speed past this. The thing that it's the through line that we've heard is that organizations who are doing this well is that they're creating those cultures of experimentation, like Amy said. And I love that they're rewarding failures too. Like, that's awesome. We should keep encouraging that. They're giving the permission to test tools, ask questions, share use cases, and learn publicly without feeling like you need to become this expert overnight. And so some practical low pressure things that companies can do is create AI office hours, pilot group. There can be like a library of shared use cases that's so helpful and can go across departments. And then also team learning. And then the last thing I'll leave you with here, and I know I'm at my 2 minutes, but I think it's so critical, is that the organizations who are doing this well are recognizing that adoption does not happen evenly across the workforce, right? Even in that question you posed at the beginning there, Letitia, we're not experiencing AI the same. Right. And it reminds me of when the iPhone first came out, right? Some people were early adopters. They immediately embraced it. They were excited. Some people waited until they saw more practical value. Some people were just like skeptics completely. And so AI adoption inside organizations looks very, very similar. There are early adopters, there's cautious observers, overwhelmed folks, and skeptical employees, right? And they're all working side by side at the same time. And so the companies need to recognize that, like, this is normal, right? And they need to create space for different learning curves while still moving the organization forward. So don't mistake that hesitation for resistance. Some employees just might need more context, more training, reassurance. So really diagnosing and seeing like what might you need to meet your employee population to help as they adapt to AI in this new way of working. All right, yeah.
Thank you, Isha. Thanks. Amazing. Yeah, I'm very curious to hear more about the CPO whose role took over AI enablement, because that's also something I'm seeing is that HR teams are kind of shouldering a lot of the weight and pressure around AI adoption while also driving culture, retention, development, and that definitely adds another layer of responsibilities. And we are passionate about supporting our HR partners. So thank you for mentioning that. And the pilot office hours sounds like a really, really easy, cost-efficient strategy that many companies can really start to implement for that AI adoption piece. All right, Amy, we are going to turn it over to you to close us out. We do have 2 minutes for this question. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry. I know that just want to be mindful of everyone's time, but I think you could do a really great job of just helping us to know, like, from here, what should we be doing next in the next 60 days for HR leaders, for people leaders, for managers? What could we be doing next to make sure we have an effective AI strategy at our companies?
Yes. So I'm going to keep this short and sweet, and I think it's very simple, but also I think just like overlooked sometimes. So I think that your company AI strategy is only as good as your leaders' understanding of the sense of possibilities with AI tooling and also the limitations. And so sometimes what I see with companies is that leaders, HR leaders, CEOs will just like delegate it and say, hey, managers, figure it out. And truly, your company's AI strategy is really only as good as if your leaders are AI fluent and understand AI and like really get the space. So maybe that's putting a little pressure on just like leaders in general. But I think that is like the single most critical thing that you can do. So if that means that your leadership team sits in a room together for 8 hours and they learn to vibe code, so be it. That's what they should do in order to like really understand what these tools can do, again, possibilities, limitations, because that will help you inform what needs to happen from there. I will also say that
Oh, did Amy freeze for y'all?
no.
Oh, okay. We're
Oh, wait,
back.
you're
We're
back.
back.
Okay, I'm back. Okay. Okay, I was going to say, just really quickly as well, I think the technical bar for AI fluency is higher. And I know people don't like me saying that, but it's true. Like, in order to be really AI fluent in this moment, there are some things that are going to be uncomfortable that you need to lean into and know what it is. So, like, do you know what an MCP is, for example? Um, and so I just think that so I definitely think, that leaders cannot delegate this. I think that companies sometimes are really restrictive with AI, and if they are, leaders should take it upon themselves to go learn personally. Obviously, there is a difficulty with that. If you're a caregiver, if you have kids, I totally get that. And like sometimes like if your company is restrictive, that is just, what it takes to be able to like really get and understand this technology. So that's what I will end with is just you got to do it personally. No one is exempt, and that's the moment we're in.
Amazing. Thank you, Amy. And something I took from what you said is like embrace the discomfort. There is going to be discomfort. There's always discomfort with being a novice or learning something new for the first time. And so there's so many gems that were dropped. I just want to say thank you to this phenomenal group of panelists, Avisha, Kenya, Amy. Please connect with them on LinkedIn. If you all can drop your LinkedIn handles in here for everyone that's here, we should all connect with each other. So drop your LinkedIn handles here so we can continue this conversation offline as well, online, offline as well. But as we wrap up, I just want to say that our team here at Perfecta is here to help you navigate this change. We will work alongside your team, creating custom trainings, fractional support to support your culture, people, and talent initiatives. So if you all are going through a significant cultural change and transformation at your company, please, please, please reach out to us. And I will drop our handle or our website and email in the chat. With that being said, for everyone that has stayed to the end, thank you, thank you, thank you. You will be getting a copy of our guide, which is about 10 questions that every leader should ask when they are rolling out AI. So we'll go ahead and drop that in the chat. And just want to say thank you all so much for attending. Any of our panelists want to share any final words before you wrap up?
No, just thank
Thank
you.
you. Yeah.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
so
having us.
much. This was amazing. I really enjoyed the conversation with everyone on the panel.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good day.